With ADHD people, we kind of experience more than our fair share of disappointment from the world. And often we've internalized this. So we use things like perfectionism as a way to deal with that and make sure that we are more perfect so we don't get things wrong. Well, what kind of things do we get wrong? Well, we've probably missed appointments. We've forgotten to bring things to work. We've sent emails to the wrong people. I've actually done that. That's not a great moment in my life. And it's kind of part of who we are. Our brains aren't great at attention to detail. They're not great at focusing on things to the minutest degree. So this disappointment that we generally have, it certainly happens within work very regularly. And if it's your own business or whether you work for someone else, you kind of feel that quite strongly. And you might think being an entrepreneur, suddenly all that would go away because it's your own business. But in my experience from coaching hundreds of entrepreneurs, that isn't the case. We can be our harshest critics. So we've experienced these little looks on people's faces, or maybe even an actual shouting match at times where they're just not happy with our performance. And before so many people were diagnosed ADHD, and certainly before it became a bit more kind of mainstream news, it was really common for people to just think, well, you're being lazy, or you're just not trying hard enough, or just focus. It's like, how do I just focus? Can someone tell me how to do that? Because my brain doesn't seem to want to. Now, an important part of coaching is getting to the point where you accept some parts of yourself that maybe you don't like quite so much. The reality is that, yes, you can take meds if you want to take meds, and that does help some of this stuff, but at the same time, you're always going to be ADHD. That just is how your brain is. If instead you were to accept that that was the truth, then life would just become easier and more comfortable. So this disappointment trap that you feel like you're in, what does it look like? Well, often perfectionism and people pleasing will be part of this disappointment trap. So it might be a case of, well, I better make sure that I over deliver, I over check, I over make sure of everything, so I just avoid any mistake possible. But let me break something down for you. Neurotypical people make mistakes as well. They don't get it all right. They also get things wrong. And they aren't as good as we are at some other things. If someone needs a brain that's going to innovate, call an ADHD person, because we're really good at that. If you imagine for a second this perfectionist tendency that you have, it's there to avoid this criticism that's going to be coming, this shame. So when people feel disappointed in you, if you are someone who is uncomfortable with disappointment, then you feel this shame. They trigger this shame in you because they want you to meet their needs. They want you to do the things that are important for them. It's important to recognize something that I said, that you have to choose to accept this disappointment. You have to choose to accept the shame. So this perfectionism, what does it really look like in your brain? Well, it's a lot of patterns of avoidance of situations, of hypervigilance, of being too aware of what's actually happening around you in order to avoid this shame. And it's actually that needs to change. If you imagine yourself here as a person that's ADHD and how perfect you can be, you can maybe nudge yourself up a little bit, but the cost to you is actually enormous in your exhaustion, in your hypervigilance. So what's the alternative? Well, just to become okay with making mistakes, to be okay with apologizing and just accepting that's how it is. For many ADHD people, because we have a smaller emotional center, the anxiety and the discomfort can be very strong when it comes to thinking about accepting disappointment. So how do you handle that? If you imagine for a second that you were to reply just as a very robotic self, the very robotic self might say something like, well, okay, I accept you're disappointed in me, but I'm actually not disappointed in myself. I did all of these things right. I got that little bit wrong, but if I was a different brain type, they would have got other things wrong. So I think, we come out about evens. That's you just saying, I'm okay with the fact that I've made a mistake. You might be disappointed, but I'm not so disappointed. Another way of looking at it might be to just say something simple like, well, I'm curious. Exactly what's the disappointment here? You can have a backwards and forwards conversation and just say, well, actually, that level of perfection isn't possible for me. I'm ADHD. I know that's what you want, but I cannot deliver that. I can't deliver that, not consistently. Now, if that's really important to you, then we need to look at new ways to get that done. So maybe you have a QA person that goes and checks some of my work that's very important, for example, something like that. These are reasonable accommodations for your brain. And now you might start thinking, well, it feels uncomfortable that my brain needs accommodation, but these people over here, they don't need it. That's me asking for some kind of special treatment. But remember that the majority of the world is neurotypical people. They already live within these accommodations for their brain. They live within the fact that they aren't particularly creative or innovative compared to us. The world is designed around their accommodations. So feel less bad about the fact that you need it living in their world. The world typically expects the same thing from everyone. And if there's one thing that I think's come out of the growth of YouTube and social media, it's the fact that people are talking about this kind of stuff. Beforehand, I think it's important to understand that they didn't know you weren't trying your best. Give the world a chance to see you as you really are and allow yourself to let go of some of this perfectionism that really keeps that disappointment at bay. So if you want to escape this disappointment trap that you find yourself in, that your ADHD tends to bring as part of it, recognize that your delivery to the world is actually huge. And ADHD people have been responsible for some of the most amazing changes within the world. I certainly don't look to diagnose anyone, but many of the great tech giants, you would imagine that they are neurodiverse. So letting go of this disappointment is one small step at a time. It's this shift towards this approach where you're more comfortable with discussing your disappointment. You don't react defensively towards it. And you also don't just lie down and say, I'll try harder again. It's accepting that that's how it is, listening, but having reasonable boundaries and saying, that's not possible for me. No matter how hard I try, that's not possible for me. What else can we do instead? I'll see you in the next video.